Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good. How's New York City?
New York City is nice and sunny.
We just reviewed that that's where you are and that it's 66 degrees. It's about 56 degrees where I am right now at home in Argentina, so I'm a little bit jealous of the warmth, but it's like too hot in our house right now, so that's kind of a problem.
Well,
Um,
yeah, okay. But wait, it's winter there, isn't it?
yeah, it is.
Well, so 56 is great.
Yeah, it was like 40 this morning. So yeah,
Oh,
it's really sunny today, I guess. So yeah. Thanks so much for being here. Ever since I kind of read your book, maybe about 6 months ago, I've just been so excited to chat with you. So I'm really excited that this is happening.
thank you very much.
I'm just going to read your bio for folks who don't already know some of the work you do.
Uh,
So, in 2006, Ari Meisel was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Crohn's is an incurable disease of the digestive tract. Ari's case was severe and required over a dozen daily medications and several hospital visits. After reaching a personal low point in the hospital, Ari decided he would do everything in his power to strengthen his, by then, weak body. Through a combination of yoga, nutrition, natural supplements, and rigorous exercise, he was able to fight back the symptoms of Crohn's until he was finally able to suspend his medication. Eventually, he was declared free of all traces of the incurable disease and competed in Ironman France in June of 2011. He has since spoken at seminars and at a regional TEDx talk and a lot of other places about his struggle against a seemingly insurmountable opponent. Through the process of data collection, self-tracking, and analysis, Ari helped develop less doing. This was a way of dealing with the daily stresses of life by optimizing, automating, and outsourcing all of his tasks in life and business. So I'd love to just start if you could sort of give us a bit more flavor kind of into your background. I know you kind of had this interesting story where you started as an entrepreneur like as a child basically and then kind of ended up on this health journey. So tell us a bit more.
Yeah, sure. So, thank you for that intro. I started my first company when I was 12, which was a website design company called Liontex, and I ended up doing, I think, like 150 or almost 200 websites over the course of having that company. And it's funny in retrospect because at the time, like being a 12-year-old was a real big advantage, because I could do HTML, and that was like this really wowing thing for a lot of adults. But it was fun. It was a really good sort of introduction to being an entrepreneur. And then when I was 16, I started a company called Tech, which was a technology consulting company. So basically, I was started with setting up computer networks and computers for homes and businesses, and then it turned into pretty much everything gadgetry related. So I started putting home theaters in, and home networks, and telephone systems, and then just personal gadgets and stuff. And that was just a lot of fun. When I was 17, I started a company called menus2go.com, which was basically a precursor to menu pages. So it was literally like one night I wanted to order food and I had a whole drawer full of takeout menus. So I decided it should be online and manually like went around and collected hundreds and hundreds of takeout menus and scanned them and put them in. And that never ended up going anywhere. I think it was a little bit ahead of our time or the time for that, but it really is basically what menu page is. And then I went to college at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years. I graduated a year early with two majors in real estate and entrepreneurship, and minors in art history and psychology.
Wow, that's like all over the place.
Yeah. Well, part of it was because I wanted to graduate early, so I was kind of filling the slots with with classes that fit the times that I had available. So psychology and art history, which it was great actually. And then I went to work in construction. So I got out of college and I was working in Texas for a Japanese real estate development company. It was kind of like very complex way up there. And I went home to visit a friend, and I went upstate New York to Binghamton to visit this friend. And while I was there, he showed me these old buildings that were these old cigar warehouses from the 1880s. And they were beautiful. It was basically like Soho in the 60s and 70s. And I grew up in Soho. My father's an art dealer, and my mother was a artist. And all I ever knew was this sort of like loft living. I grew up in a former chocolate factory. So these buildings were very much like that, gorgeous. And I had this vision. I was 20 years old. I was like, oh, I can build lofts here. So I made an offer to buy the buildings that day. It was very, very cheap. And got a loan from a local bank because it was a very big economic development project at the time. And the deal was that anybody that worked on the job had to teach me their trade. So I basically spent the next 3 years learning and doing every construction trade imaginable, working my ass off. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done and the most amazing learning experience. And not only in terms of learning how to build, how to deal with historic preservation and construction and surprises that come along with that, but really managing a team of people that were all older than me, all with much greater skill sets than I had, and different personalities, and then the legal aspects and the zoning and the political things that were involved in doing this kind of development. It was really like crash course doesn't quite cover it, but I learned so much. But it's also a very unhealthy lifestyle, and I essentially at 23 like broke my body. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was eating fast food at least twice a day, drinking every night, and just under an enormous amount of stress. And I broke my body. And what that meant was that at 23 I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So as you mentioned, what Crohn's is, and I was put on a lot of meds very quickly and got sicker and sicker and weaker and hit this low point where I realized that I'd gone from working these 18-hour days. I was hard charging, getting it all done. And now I'm in a situation where I'm forced to ask myself a very fundamental question, which is what am I going to do now that I can only work an hour a day?
Wow.
Basically. Yeah. And so the result was that two things. One is that I recognized the constraint on my time, but also that I had to get more done. So it forced me, sort of serendipitously, I guess, to create this brand new system of productivity that I would call less doing, as in less doing, more living. So that quickly developed into 9 various fundamentals, and which we can touch on if you want. But essentially the overarching theme for what I do is that I teach people how to optimize, automate, and outsource everything in their lives. And that can be applied to everything in your life and your business. So that's kind of the story. So then it turned into I was teaching a course, and then it turned into the book, which, as I know you've read. And then 9 months ago, or 8 or 9 months ago, I started a virtual assistant company with my partner, Nick Sonnenberg. And together we have created the world's most capable on-demand chiefs of staff, basically. So you can get anything done whenever you want, wherever you want, including very large projects. And that turned into us being able to do a lot deeper consulting for businesses. So we've been doing it for individuals through less doing for the last 6 or 7 years. Nick and I are now doing it for businesses, large organizations, and making them more efficient in the way they communicate and manage projects and automate their processes and sort of everything in between. It's really fun work.
So I want to ask you a question about this idea of the connection, I guess, between productivity and success, because I think this kind of gets to this idea that, we like to feel busy, and feeling busy makes us feel maybe successful sometimes. But I wonder, when you work with clients and, when you sort of understand what it means to become more productive, do you kind of have to give up a little bit of sort of the pride you had in what you used to do?
Oh, I think quite the contrary. I mean, I setting up these kinds of systems that work for you and rather than you working for them, I think is like the ultimate pride. And the thing is everything that I do that saves me time, that time is immediately filled up with something better. Honestly, there's plenty of stuff to do. There's never a moment of boredom. So it's more about like making more time to do better things. So every time I wipe the slate clean, I fill it up with more interesting stuff, more fascinating stuff, more fun, and it's a constant, like, not to sound like a fortune cookie, but like the journey is what's so enjoyable about that. There's no winning or losing in that. There's really, in some ways, no end goal. It's just that constant improvement. Like every day is better. So to me, you mentioned success. My definition of success is that if I am better at something today, anything, than I was yesterday, then I am being successful.
So how do you prioritize that in your own life? Being better at something tomorrow than you are today?
There's always problems to solve. I have 4 small children. So on the personal side, there's always something going on. Yeah.
How old are they?
I have a 4-year-old, twin 3-year-olds, and a 13-week-old.
Huh.
Yeah. So, and we're done. Yes, we're done. but we wanted the girl. So the fourth one was a girl. Um,
Fraternal twins?
Fraternal, yes. They could not be more different.
That's a full house. Okay, so wow.
Yeah, so there's and that always presents interesting situations. And to me, that is a form of setting those when it's not artificial, but setting those restrictions and limitations. That having that many kids at that age with things going on, like there's it's one of the reasons why I work during school hours, and that is a restriction I place on myself, but it makes me more efficient. It forces me to do that. So it's not that it's a problem, obviously the kids are not a problem, but it does present a unique situation that forces me to do things better. And you don't get sick days with kids, basically. So that's one. And then on the business side, like we are with our business in particular, but honestly every business has these kinds of things. If you look at them, there's always things that can be made better. Anytime you find somebody saying that they're doing something because that's the way I've always done it, that's a problem that can be fixed.
Is that when you kind of go in and you work with folks or with companies, is that the typical sort of first response you get all the time of why someone, when you push into sort of why someone does something this way and some sort of process is inefficient, is the main reason because they've just always done it that way?
It depends on what generation of person you're dealing with. So some of it is, like with my parents' generation, that's what you're dealing with. Like the behavior change is much more difficult with them, even if they're, like my dad is 73, but he likes technology. Like he'll try new things and stuff, but it's still, the adoption is never full in a lot of ways. So that's a big one. A lot of it, if I had to really, really generalize, it's just that most people don't take the time to look inward and see actually what they're doing, and realizing that, I do this one thing every day. Anything that you do that's repeatable, that's something that should be automated, honestly, pretty much everything. But if you see I check like my check register, or like I balance my checkbook every day, that's a pretty basic one. Or every day I email 10 I email 10 different clients. I call 5 different people. Like if you start to just recognize, hey, I'm actually doing that every day, or like every other day, that's a real opportunity to make something better. But most people don't do that. It's just because we get in this autopilot mode, which is sort of how we're set up neurologically anyway.
So what happens when you realize that there's something that you do on a regular basis, but you really believe it's kind of your best work and it's the thing that really, really pushes you towards success, right? So maybe it's, if you're a blogger or something, or a writer, it's the writing work you do, or it's the blogging work you do. Is that something that you should even sort of try to hack at in terms of productivity, or is that just sort of in a different halo, a different silo?
So no, nothing is safe from the night of productivity hacking, because this is the problem. The farther and farther you move up the chain, the less scalable it becomes in some ways, right? So on the one hand, yes, okay, you could say I'm a writer and I am a good writer and I'm really good at it and blah blah blah. But all the other stuff I'm an outsource, so I'm not going to deal with making the graphics, and I'm not even going to deal with posting it. I'm just going to save it and someone else can post it. And I'm not going to deal with the research. Somebody else can do the research. So all I have to do is sit down and do what I do best, which is to write.
Right.
The problem with that is that people can tend to get a little bit siloed at that point, and then say like, okay, I'm just going to do the thing that I'm best at, and then they don't improve.
Wow.
And in some ways, what you might find, and this is kind of specific, but I've actually seen this, where you find somebody who's been a writer forever, but so 2 things. One, they've been a writer of they've been a journalist forever, and they're really good at that. But then they get to a point where they get to expand their horizon a little, and then they find out that they're actually a really good playwright. It's a completely different kind of medium and a different thing to write for. So that's one possibility. But the other one is that somebody who's been writing for 30 years, and 30 years might not be the right amount, but maybe they love writing on a typewriter, and they had their Apple IIgs and whatever, and they just, like the guy who wrote Game of Thrones wrote it on, I think, a Commodore 64. Yeah, literally, with green font and like a DOS output. But someone like that might find that if they start exploring other things, that maybe they really like doing video now. or maybe they like managing a group of writers where they can give off a whole bunch of ideas and then those people can write it for them. But they might just decide that they want to become better writers, what they're good at, and they want to do that. And whatever activity might support that, and that activity, honestly, may be learning a completely different habit, or not habit, a hobby. When I came up with most of the fundamentals for Less Doing, I was taking a welding class.
Wow.
I had done a lot of welding when I was working in construction, but never anything artistic. And before our first son was born, I, for some reason, decided in my head that I wanted to learn like more artistic welding, and I made like his name, what it was going to be, in steel. But it was working with my hands, which is something I hadn't done in a few years because I've not done construction in a few years, and it was just a different modality. And in that moment, with the sparks and it was like meditative in some ways. And I came up with a lot of those business ideas because I stepped to the side of myself. So that's the one risk, is that you shave away all the other stuff with the goal of being able to focus on the thing that you think that you're best at, and then you stay there.
That's incredibly powerful. Thank you so much for talking today. This was great. I loved it, learned a bunch. Can you tell folks what you're really working on now and where folks can find you?
Yes, so the best place to find everything is lessdoing.com, and we're on Twitter and Instagram, and everything is with Less Doing. The virtual assistants are the main sort of entry point, I think, to learning what we do and how we do it and how we can help you, because ours they're all trained by me to sort of spread the word and make these methods more available. So it's really one of the things that we do that's unique to most companies is that it's really a two-way street. If a client gives us a task or a process that is inefficient, we will make it more efficient for them. So then they don't have to actually even issue it again necessarily. We try to less doify everything that we do. So it's a really great process. And that would be the best place to start, is lessdoing.com. But the blog is there. We have a really great podcast that we do every week, where we talk about the latest in productivity news and tools and tips. And lessdoing.com is a central place for everything.
Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. Thank you.